So you finished watching Avatar The Last Airbender for the first or 63rd time, and you're wondering where to go next. Well, the showrunners and writers went on to create The Legend of Korra, a direct sequel to ATLA and the obvious next step. Oh no! Alright, so Netflix's Dragon Prince, the spiritual successor to ATLA, written by the head writer of the original show, and often one of the places fans look to go when they want more of stories in that kind of style. But how good is it? Does it hold up to Avatar's original run? Well, I know quite a bit about Avatar, but I wouldn't necessarily call myself an expert. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Dragon Prince, both as a standalone and as a successor to ATLA, but we're going to have a little help from the most qualified expert we can find, overanalyzing Avatar.
Hello!
The animation is probably the most jarring thing when you first come into watching The Dragon Prince. It uses like 3D Ruby models or something, and the first season is animated in what seems to be like 12 frames a second, and that alone can make it really hard to watch. I know sometimes low frame rate can be an intentional artistic design, but considering that the later seasons start to smooth out the frame rate, I feel like the first season suffered from this unintentionally or as some form of shortcut or budgeting issue. I will say that when they iron the issue out in Book 2 and Book 3, some of the action scenes can be really pretty to look at and have decent choreography, especially the stuff with Rayla doing elf shit and most of the other melee combat. On the other hand, the magic is as bland as it comes. It's completely generic, and the idea of drawing a rune in the air is kind of neat, but it throws off the pace of the action scenes and it doesn't seem extremely practical either. Claudia's dark magic has a bit of wiggle room for creativity and animation, like the bracelet becoming snakes or whatever, but even that seems pretty commonplace within the genre, and while it's animated smoothly, it's not like jaw-dropping or a visual spectacle. Outside of battle, the general set pieces and art style of the universe is just normal fantasy stuff. I don't think there's anything that stands out as being uniquely of this world in a way that something like Ba Sing Se is iconic to the ATLA world, but it's just fine enough to get the job done.
So obviously the first season is jarring as hell to get into, but eventually your brain slows down to the right speed for it to mostly work. Season 2 and 3 basically rectified the frame rate issue entirely, so I can't whine about it too much. As for the aesthetics of the show, the best word I can come up with is uninspired. Dudes in armor, forests, you got the lava level, there's nothing that really challenges a viewer. The closest you get is the spooky mountain probably. Even the illusory magic isn't all that impressive. One of my big qualms with the show is the action actually. In a show like Avatar, your magic system is deep and robust, and the main form of fighting for most characters. It's so deep you don't really know what any character will do at any moment, which makes things exciting and filled with spectacle. Dragon Prince doesn't have this luxury. Most of the fight scenes come down to swords clanking in no very visually appealing way, and then it ends in a draw, or swords clanking, someone comes out and does a magic spell that takes a couple seconds to cast, killing any momentum the action had, and then it ends in a draw anyway. Or at least no one gets hurt, except that one time. Dark magic, on the other hand, at least has the X factor of you're not really sure what you're getting into when the casting starts. So I think that's a good thing. It's something interesting at least. So for me, the world building in this show is pretty good actually. It starts off pretty heavy with the intro to the first episode. 7 magics is pretty steep, but I like that you basically don't deal with any of the magic types other than the Moon Shadow Elves magic and dark magic for a good little while when the show starts. I think that really helps not make it too muddled. The worst aspect though is that the world at a surface level is pretty milquetoast. Humans and elves, medieval kingdoms, swords and magic, it's pretty generic. Even the name Catalyst sounds more like the name a middle schooler wrote in his notebook while trying to think of a kingdom name rather than an actual kingdom name. And the world doesn't feel very alive, does it? How many distinct, meaningful locations with personality have they been to in 27 episodes? Not many for that kind of runtime. What's really cool to me is that the story and magic get more complex the further the group get from home, and the closer they get to Zadia. So it's like the further they get, the more is revealed to the viewer, which is a nice dynamic to build in a show-to-viewer relationship. But where this formula falters is in the episode where Viren is telling the young queen about the mission to kill the Magma Titan. That episode is, for the most part, a huge black hole in the story. Our team is on the road, having adventures. Viren is having difficulty deciding if he's going to listen to the elf in the mirror. Those are both interesting stories. But then we have to clunkily include Ezrin and Callum's parents' story. It just doesn't fit well. But we are at the point where we need some of that information. I don't think we needed an entire flashback episode for the little information we needed though. On the complete flip side, the effect that the next flashback episode has is awesome. The one about Viren and Harrow killing the Dragon King? That's great. He's telling it to Erevo, so it seems natural, and as soon as he's done telling it, Callum and Rayla arrive at the Dragon King's statue/corpse. That's awesome organic world building that plays nicely into the story you're telling right there and right then.
As Oe mentioned, they hit you pretty quickly with the totality of the magic system, but limitations on what is actually applied is a nice way of handling it. However, I personally find the wall of exposition that gets thrown at you in Book 1 to be a bit heavy-handed. Like, for the entire first season, they're just throwing out new terms, places, people, events at you, non-stop, without leaving much breathing room in between, and it can feel like a lot to take in all at once. It does smooth itself out though, and once you have all the necessary information, it gets fed to you in a far more streamlined manner. I find Viren's retellings of exposition, both the Magma Titan and the killing of Thunder, to be a bit much, but I just personally don't like being fed a large quantity of flashback shit all at once. The show opens with the idea of Thunder and the divide between the humans and Zadia, and we know King Haro killed Thunder, so I feel like they could have more evenly dispersed that retelling to create a more digestible narrative through line leading up to Callum's arrival at the Dragon Royal Lair, or whatever it is. There's a few more hiccups that I should talk about specifically, particularly when Callum and Rayla arrive in Zadia. They just bombard you with animals and nature and magic and all this random shit that's almost definitely not going to matter, and while it does serve to build the mystical realm of Zadia, it gives a certain feeling that it's ultimately pointless and some of it is only included for the sake of one-off jokes. The same can be said for most of the Elven clans, even the Moonshadow Elves, who have a member within the ranks of the main characters. They're just vaguely sneaky. Sunfire Elves can make lightsabers and go magma mode, which is basically unexplained, and the rest of them might as well be Season 1 Yu-Gi-Oh cards with single-sentence descriptions. I can't be too hard on it yet, though. We're technically not even at the halfway point of the intended story, so it's entirely possible that Aaron Ehaz has some grand plan and we're still in the stages of the fundamental building blocks. Overall, it's hard to mess up building a universe of this sort of Tolkien-style medieval nighttime, so it does an adequate job. A theme I'm going to be throwing around a lot this video is the idea of just fine. As in, a lot of things in this show are just okay enough. Nothing super fantastic, but nothing overly terrible either. A perfect example of this theme is Viren, who you see for the first time and you immediately know what he's about. Slender, pale guy dressed in all black, and look at that face. Look at how angular that shit is. He just wears his character's identity like a badge and there's almost no depth to it. They obviously tried to add depth in the form of attempting to make his actions morally gray by being about the protection of humanity, but it's just not something I'm buying when on the flip side they're also trying to make me believe that all peace costs is delivering the egg to Zadia. If either of those concepts are true, the other one has to be false. Callum is a decent main character. He doesn't suffer from the main character syndrome of being a faceless mask and actually has a likable personality. I really like that he's a mage instead of falling into the much easier trope of making him a knight or some shit. It does feel rather Avatar-like that he's a spellcaster that's probably going to gain multiple schools of magic over the course of the series, but it's not too similar to the point of redundance. Rayla starts along with the other elves of being so painfully the basic concept of a fantasy elf it hurts, but over the course of the 3 books that are currently available, I do think she's probably the candidate for most meaningful character arc. She has aspects of her that give her a much more fleshed out character in the way of flaws and desires, and it gives her that feeling of being genuine and real in how she processes the world. If we're speaking comparatively and putting her side by side with like Katara, I do feel like she's on a better pace to develop into her own strong character, and that's a really good thing. On top of Rayla's solo development, her and Callum's relationship is one of the furthest things from the theme of generic bullshit in the show so far. They don't make it a huge spectacle that they get together, and they don't draw it out as a plotline. 2 people just like each other and start dating, and it also feels real, and while it might not have all the fireworks and pizzazz of parallel romance side plots, the down-to-earth reality of it makes the show feel a bit more comforting in a way. Soren is the closest thing to filling Sokka's sort of comedic relief angle, but goes about it in a completely different way. He's dumb, but he's a lovable kind of dumb, and he has his own little redemption arc going on, and it's good. Nothing amazing, but good. The most interesting character in the show, though, is without a doubt Erebos. From the second he appears in the mirror and his story begins, he commands your attention. In an otherwise mundane general fantasy setting, he offers intrigue and mystery. He seems nigh omnipotent while still presenting himself as a servant. His motives remain unclear even at the end of Book 3, and it's the part of the story that has me wanting more and more with each scene. I can't help but feel like he has some influence, or at the very least similarities, with Madara Uchiha. It makes it seem like he's going to go down a similar path of using Viren to free himself from his prison and sort of being the final boss of the series, which would be super predictable, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Having a villain be present for so long and slow burn to their final boss status is a really good way to build an emotional investment in the story, but more on that later. He's cool as shit though, and he's got swagger about him that's just, damn. Look at that shit. Alright, tons left and I'm running out of time. Let's rapid fire. Ezrin is okay, he's whatever, just a nice kid, but he feels underdeveloped. Claudia is awful, and I hate almost every second she's on screen, but at least she has room for development and could be interesting eventually. Zim is a weird dog thing, and while he's cute, he does almost nothing. And the frog was originally really awful because he's ugly and didn't do shit, but he got better somehow, and now I like him. Maybe it was the jealousy of Zim arc, I don't know. He's cool though. All the elves that aren't Rayla and Nyx are awful, and Nyx is not on screen long enough to become actually likable. And King Harrow is aggressively pushed as dad of the year to the point of becoming annoying. Everyone else is just fine or below average, and I don't have anything to say about them aside from that.
I still feel like we're in the beginning of the story at this point, so I'm not really sure if the characters have really gotten where they're going. Ezrin going from silly kid to king making big decisions was a good one for me, but then he just kind of gets usurped and goes back to his old role as the kid on the team. I think Rayla's arc, so far at least, is about coming to terms with her own weakness. She wasn't able to kill the soldier in the first scene and she hated that, but slowly over the course of the show she becomes alright with that weakness. She opens up to Ezrin and Callum and she gets to be a little goofy, much unlike her elf assassin friends. And eventually she even lets herself cry and be comforted by Callum and they get together. As far as an emotional arc, I think so far Rayla has the best one by far. And then there's Callum, who is kind of in the middle. It seems like his entire thing is just about gaining confidence in himself. For the most part, he's just a stuttering, awkward protagonist, but as he learns more magic, he comes into his own and gets more confident, able to compliment Rayla and nonchalantly show up the bird guy at the top of the spire who was about to say he couldn't do magic. Is that a very interesting character arc though? Your mileage may vary, but to me he's at second place at least. And then Viren just gets swindled by Erebos over and over and over. But is he really getting swindled if he's getting everything he wants and all this power? I don't know, he's kind of just like a weird puppet for most of the show. Erebos is cool though. So I don't think it's any secret that the comedy in this show isn't awesome. It's a kid's show, so you're not going to have adult humor, but you can still absolutely be funny. But so many times in the first 2.5 seasons, there are jokes that just lead to terrible punchlines. I think it comes down to your characters, honestly. Callum is awkward, Rayla is sarcastic, and Ezrin's a kid. Those are basically your 3 comedy styles you get out of your main 3, and they all take turns interchangeably acting as the straight man for each other. But their jokes don't play off each other's personalities well. Rayla is just sarcastic at Callum's awkwardness. Callum is just a big brother at Ezrin being a kid. You don't have one character that's the funny one. You can have characters that aren't the funny one be funny, and it's hard to have a genuinely funny character. But I think splitting up the humor so evenly between your main cast and not really finding a comedic style that they can all kind of mesh in really results in the eye-rolling humor you get a lot out of this show. And then you have the other 2 jokesters. Claudia is awful. I don't get any humor out of anything she says. She has the lowest brow humor in the entire show, and it just sort of feels like little brother humor. Or like that guy who knows he isn't actually funny, so he delivers bad puns and raises his eyebrows at you, praying that he can hit the so not funny it's funny chord, but fails miserably. I just don't like Claudia. Soren, on the other hand, is a very odd case. He has a different brand of humor. He's dumb as a post, which can be funny, but for the first 2 seasons or so, basically 100% of his humor misses the mark, just like the rest of the show. But miraculously, somewhere in the middle ether of season 3, he gets a couple good lines. He starts it. Then he gets a couple more. Then randomly Callum makes a half-decent joke. Then there's a pretty funny situational joke the episode after that. And you're just watching it and you're like, where did this come from? I feel like Dragon Prince really starts to hit a stride in season 3, and the comedy is no small part of it. It's got potential.
When you dive a bit deeper into the specifics of the comedy, it gets even stranger the more you look at it. Of course, it comes with the unavoidable jokes for the demographic, like the fart flowers or the frog really liking to steal the baker's food, but there's definitely a few jokes in there left for a more adult audience as well. They reference Sailor Moon literally 3 times, and the joke misses 3 out of 3 times, and to my knowledge, that's even more references than they have to Avatar. I don't even know who this joke is intended for, but it's whatever. I do agree that Soren is a pretty hit or miss character, but I think he has a few hits earlier than the 3rd book. Oftentimes I'd feel bad for laughing at them because of how lowbrow they were, but I still did laugh at them, even if the punchline was mostly just Soren's inability to understand the situation. But removing myself from the cynical adult outlook, I was able to enjoy him a bit. Oa's right though, the main cast gets almost 0 laughs, but I think that's just because we're 2 grown men watching a show made for children. Exception of course being Callum's scene with the boomerang. It's probably the funniest thing in the show, but I don't think it counts as a solid comedic note from Dragon Prince itself because it's by nature a referential 4th wall break. But it's still good, and it's right around the time the show picks up in comedy as well as every other aspect, so it's looking like the show could get somewhere even in the comedy department. The overall storyline of the series feels pretty well paced for the first 3 books. It's early on that we're introduced to the main goal of the series, that of course being the delivery of the egg, later Zim, to Zadia for peace or whatever. It follows that journey at a pretty solid pace. It's a typical adventure story, and even early on it hits the mark of fine. But there is a lot of interesting side stories that help out a bit. The first season does a great job setting up the heroes and their unlikely alliance and growing pains, but the plot really gets going in the second season in the ways of Zim now being a living being, Callum being an actual wizard, and Ezrin being ejected from the main plot. Tons of ways. It also introduces Erebos, who, as mentioned, is the best and most interesting character by a country mile. With that said though, book 3 ends with Zim being delivered back to his mother, and there's still 4 seasons left to go. When compared to Avatar directly, Sozin's Comet is established as the ultimate endgame in the 8th episode, and the entire pace of the show is dictated by that imminent event. The only real thread we have left at the end of book 3 of Dragon Prince is Erebos being cocooned and probably up to no good, along with Viren being revived and also likely being up to no good. Callum's journey as the protagonist to someday master all 7 forms of primal magic is alluded to a few times, notably in his weird psychedelic nightmare, but it's not presented as a major endgame goal, just simply a plotline that can and probably will happen. Erebos as a character does a great job driving the plot forward. It's strange how he somehow found the most gullible human on the planet that also has all the power to make these things happen. It seriously gets to a point where Viren no longer questions what Erebos says to him and just blindly follows along, which is fine, but it does come across weird from a narrative standpoint, as Viren is basically being sold as a puppet super clearly, which leaves only Erebos as a real villain, when you could easily make Viren a mini-boss mid-series and continue on from there. From what we've been given thus far, I do feel like the story is good, and it still has room to go further, but the current state of limbo the plot is in needs to be resolved almost immediately in book 4, or the pace is going to be severely thrown out of whack. It's good to have the story in a quantum state of both feeling complete and having a lot left to do, but it's also a very dangerous position to be in. I'm hopeful for the future, though.
The story, yeah. To me, it's kind of slow, right? ATLA had the benefit of Appa, who was basically just a car, so the gang could be at a new destination every episode, which works really well. But Jesus, it feels like there's a lot of sitting around and being on the road in this show. Like, how long did they stay with that illusion elf lady? It felt like forever. I kept thinking, like, this girl and her dog are still here? Aside from the pacing issues I have, the story's fine, I think. It's nothing to write home about, not yet at least. Just a kind of generic adventure. Humans, elves, on foot, fellowship style, the relationship between species and people. It's good, but it's nothing new. Obviously, the coolest plotline is Viren and Erebos. That plotline is sick, especially when they're communicating through the mirror. It's super interesting. I think it loses a little bit of its punch when Erebos is able to astral project himself, but his character is still super interesting at least. It does start to come together nicely though as season 3 comes to its climax, just like most of the rest of the elements of the show. So despite being unimpressed right now, I'm still really open-minded for whatever else they have planned going forward.
Alright, now we're going to get into the wrap-up portion of the video. So in this portion, we're going to have a conversation, unscripted, and see where it goes. We're going to talk about how it compares to Avatar, and our other thoughts on characters and stuff we didn't cover. So, starting off, how do you think the show held up to Avatar's legacy?
Well, Avatar's whole thing is, it's like a timeless classic, so it's hard for anything to really stand up to it. It's, I've always kind of said in my head, and to you multiple times at this point, that it kind of feels like the first half of Avatar season 1. It kind of just hasn't really found any kind of groove yet, kind of like the early episodes of Avatar. But then, like, I don't know, it starts to feel like kind of like the second half of Avatar season 1, you know?
Yeah, I was actually, I think I said to you that I think Dragon Prince, like, pound for pound to Avatar is just as good, if not on a better pace, because if you compare the episodes, it goes up to Zuko alone, I think.
Zuko alone, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And yeah. Zuko alone is when the show really starts to, hit its stride. So I feel like it could go places.
Yeah, I've always said that, like, Avatar really doesn't, like, take its foot off the gas after The Blind Bandit, which is the episode before Zuko alone. But it's like, I don't know still, though, right? Because, like, before, like, does the Dragon Prince have anything at this point that stands up to Zuko alone? I mean, there's not really...
No, there's not like
many things. There's not many things that do stand up to Zuko alone in the forms of a fucking cartoon.
It's just like a general quality more so than like it's increasing overall, but it's not particularly fantastic. There's no stand because you can watch like Zuko alone or Tales of Ba Sing Se and just like ride with it. Like it's just its own standalone thing. But there's none of that in Dragon Prince so far.
Right. It's just and like it's not fair to entirely judge it, right? Because it's like there's 7 books, right?
Yeah,
right?
I think 7.
Yeah, so and we're only through 3, and I mean I don't know when it's ever gonna fucking end, but I think it's hard to judge it right now. But it's like it's starting to hit a stride. You can kind of feel it.
I feel like from Sol Regum, like the start of book 3 onward, it started to be a lot better. I mean, at the time you were coming off of streaming, but it was good from the start of book 3 onward, and it seems to just be getting better. It does feel a bit weird to end the season, end book 3 on just like nothing. Like Zim has been delivered at this point. I don't know what is the next step.
Yeah, it's like what's the journey? Yeah, right. Like you finished your entire huge journey.
They need to immediately hit us with some shit that's gonna go down, or else we're gonna be like...
Yeah, and it's like, what is this show gonna evolve into, right? Like, is it still gonna be like this, like, world-tromping adventure? Or is it gonna turn into, like, this weird political drama because now the humans and elves might kind of be friends because they completed their mission, and, like, the dragon queen's probably cool with them. It's hard to say.
So... aside from the story and everything, comparing it to Avatar, is there any, like... There's a lot we didn't cover in our sections. Like, are there any characters you want to talk about? Like, for instance, I think Lou Jane is a really weird character. She didn't fit at all what she was supposed to be.
I fucking hate Lou Jane, dude.
Lou Jane is awful.
Like, she's so, like, weirdly goofy, but, like, I don't know, is it supposed to be that she just got quirky because she lives on a mountain by herself?
And when she got introduced, I thought she was going to be, like, a mentor-type character, and they just went a completely different direction with her. She was really weird.
Well, yeah, because they set her up, because they're like, oh, she lives on the top of the spooky mountain, and there's monsters, and oh, no, it turns out the monsters are fake, but she's this fucking 10th level wizard that fucking makes fake monsters, and she gives dogs legs and shit.
Speaking of the dog's leg, the only thing Lou Jane did, she showed up, took one of the dog's legs, and fed them worms. That's the only thing she did for the entire appearance she had.
Yeah, it was very odd. It's just like the bird did more than she did, right?
Yeah, Fifi actually contributed to the plot.
Are we missing something there? Like, she let them chill for a few days, which I brought up in the video that I hated that. Why did they stick around that long? I hated that.
Things do take a long time. Like, even the desert arc was 2 episodes. And over the entire thing, it was like flashbacks. They also did 2 flashbacks back to back. The Viren explaining the Magma Titan thing was 2 episodes. That surprised me in editing. I was like, geez.
That was 2 episodes?
That was 2 episodes long, and it was like fused with Callum's reading the letter from his dad. So it was like 2 flashbacks together in 1 episode.
Fucking hell. Well, I mean, Avatar kind of did something like that with Zuko and Aang's backstories. And I mean, it worked in that episode because that's like everyone's favorite fucking episode.
The storm is good.
But it's like, I don't know. I feel like that just really like halts any kind of progression that the story is on. Because like the storm comes in at a part of the story where, I don't know, it's kind of the same actually. Why does the storm work better? Because it definitely does.
I think the storm works better because it has the actual like goings on, like the fisherman, the story with the fisherman. So it's like plot relevant that there's some shit going on because it links with Aang being in a storm, sort of.
Yeah.
If you're really stretching.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's true. Yeah.
And then Zuko being in the thing, it's like it shows his crew and the turmoils they're going through and shit. So I feel like it links in better.
Yeah, it is more integrated. It's like because Callum literally just goes below deck on that weird pirate ship and just like reads a book, and then Viren's telling a story to a kid who already knows the story, like for sure, right?
She says, "I've heard this story before, but go on. I like hearing it."
Yes, please continue. I'd like to hear about my lineage's great feats. Of course she wants to hear about that shit. But it's like, yeah, it's just such a, and like, God, what a drag on the story. Because like, the Viren mirror Erebos plot is really kicking ass at that point. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that shit's really good.
And then he throws a blanket over the mirror and Erebos is just on the back burner for 2 episodes. We don't see him.
I feel like Erebos like carries season 2 by himself because you're sitting there wondering what's going on, and it's like you're super interested.
Yeah, he's super interesting.
All right, so hard question time. I don't think you're even going to be allowed to answer it, but comparatively speaking to Korra as a successor, what do you think? You avoiding that one?
As a successor to Avatar, I feel like they both hit different aspects of what you would call successordom. Dragon Prince really tries to capture the tone of Avatar more, and I feel like Korra really tries to move on from the tone of Avatar and do its own thing with the world. I guess that's my take. It's that they just do different things.
Yeah, I can comment directly on whether or not I think one's better, because I do not hinge on Korra.
I'm sure you will.
Dragon Prince is certainly better, for me at least. I like the fact that it has the same tone, and it's similar, but it's not too similar. It's just the right amount of similarness. So the joke with Callum in the desert with the boomerang, do you think that has any implications to Callum being some sort of reincarnation of Sokka or something?
The only thing that could possibly mean is that the world of the Dragon Prince is some far flung off future of the Avatar world that is so far in the future that it's completely unrecognizable, right? And Sokka, since the time of Avatar: The Last Airbender, has now been reincarnated into Callum. That's the only thing I can think of.
That's got to be canon. Like, that joke is left in there, and it is a fourth wall break, but I'm taking it as canon. And the only thing that it could mean is that maybe he's got like a attack titan power or something. Can see future lives. Maybe Dragon Prince takes place before Avatar 1.
Or, I mean, we don't know how Sokka dies. Maybe Sokka dies to a spirit who, the spirit's power is literally like, I will send you to a different dimension.
Yeah, you get sent to 3D hell.
You will go to this awful 3D 12 frames per second animation realm where everything is terrible and choppy.
You get stuck with Ezran as a little brother.
Yeah, that's the fate worse than death. He's just talking to Ezra, and he's like, I can't help but think, like, I feel like you're my, like, you should be older and a girl. Why do I feel like this?
So in the video, both of us mentioned that Viren is clearly being used by Erebos, and it feels really weird because he's just a puppet and that's it. So what do you think they could have done with him instead?
It's really, really weird because his entire story is around him being a puppet, but he's also supposed to be this, like, 10th level wizard, like this crazy threat to everyone. But he's just, like, a marionette. So, like, it's a really weird... It's really weird what they've done with him. And what could they do different? Just have him not be so, like... Have him have some agency of his own. He's literally just listening to the elf in the mirror at this point. And he's like flying by the seat of his pants. He's like, are you sure we should be doing this? And Erebos just looks at him and goes, yes. And then he's like, all right, we're going to go fucking take the Sun Elf's son, I guess.
Make it a black sun. Yeah, I mean, the first thing he does where he, like, denies cutting himself, even that is barely agency, because he did a bunch of ritual shit. He didn't even know what was going on. He's just like, oh, this dude that I can't even talk to is suggesting that I mix these things. Anything could happen. That could have exploded immediately.
Yeah, he could have just been like, oh, fucking my mirror got hooked up to some human. I hate humans. I'm going to make him drink a potion that turns him into a frog. Like it could be anything.
Another weird thing, they, like, web his eye. Erebos puts a web on his eye and nobody talks about it. It's just there.
Well, I feel like Soren and Claudia are both kind of like, but they don't mention it. I kind of got that vibe. Maybe that's just me.
I think it's, like, super weird. I would have liked one comment. Like, Soren is that type of character that would make a joke about it. Like, you got some shit in your eye, Dad.
Yeah, you're right.
And then he gets all evil and...
He goes down that path, like, very quickly. He's just like... And it's just like, he feels like he's just not in control at all. It's just like, I'm doing this for humanity. But Erebos is like, alright, we gotta kill, like, literally every Sun Elf. We're gonna turn all of your humans that you're doing all this for, we're gonna turn them into hulking monstrosities. They're fine with that. You're the most fine with that, Viren. You're very happy about it, actually. And Viren's just like, yes, I think.
How can he justify the magma thing? Like, the other people seem a bit smarter. I can't remember the name of the prince, but the prince who gets turned first literally just turns into the Incredible Hulk. Like, he has no brain power anymore.
Yeah, he's literally just like a, like, screaming, berserking maniac. And all the people were just like, oh, shit, maybe not. But then he just did. the giant berserker wave, and everyone was like, oh, well, I guess I don't get to choose.
Yeah, how did he go from needing a single, like, ritual focused on the prince to a massive AoE magma golem wave?
Yeah, it's very odd. And I mean, maybe it feels great to become a weird magma person, and they're very excited about it, and they were just, like, really revved up the next day to go, I don't know, kill the baby dragon or whatever. But I feel like not.
There is 4 books left, like we said.
Yeah.
So do you think that it's gonna like do you think it's on the rails to become really good right now, or do you think it's just hitting a temporary spike?
Well, yeah, so I think like it has a lot of potential going forward. And I don't know what it is about, it's like it just starts to hit a stride in like every single aspect. Like the animation feels nicer, the comedy starts hitting at least a little better. Like, the characters start to feel more like themselves, weirdly, even though we've only seen them be themselves. Like, they haven't been out of character ever, but they start to just feel like more, like, meaty characters. I don't know, I feel like it has a lot of room for growth and potential, but the only thing is that where's it going to go from here, like we said?
Yeah, I feel like you can tell that the head writer, I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Yeah.
I feel like he has like a distinct style, and you can tell that with it hitting its stride, it could just stay at that pace because he knows what he's doing. So I'm pretty hopeful for it. I don't think you'll be covering too much of it. Maybe down the line. But
never know.
I'm super excited to watch it. We're probably going to watch it together, like when the seasons come out.
Probably. We could have a cataclysmic falling out. Who knows? I could hate you in a month from now.
Highly possible. But we're probably going to watch it together, and who knows? OA could be back on the channel. I could coerce him to come back.
It could happen.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, make sure to comment and subscribe and all that stuff. Huge shout out to Overanalyzing Avatar for coming to the channel to do this collab. We've been wanting to do something like this for a long time, and I think the video came together really well. If you came from his channel and you want to see more from me, there's an Avatar video on screen right now that you can go watch, and I'll also put up a Futurama video that's sort of in his format. If you haven't seen Overanalyzing Avatar's content, you should go over to his channel and binge watch everything he's uploaded. It's all really good. That's it for me. I'll see you next time.